4 million tons of chemicals and fertilizers every year have pushed the world's largest rice-growing regions into a state of severe exhaustion. Instead of sending out fleets of modern pesticide-spraying drones, China is carrying out a strange exchange on a scale of millions of hectares. They release thousands of ducks flooding into young rice fields as a wide-scale intervention. This action sounds illogical, because everyone knows young rice is extremely fragile. The appearance of thousands of these creatures should have meant the end of the harvest. And yet, an unbelievable result appeared. There was no structural collapse at all. The rice fields began to revive themselves in a way no machine could achieve. So, what secret lies behind the footsteps of this biological army? And what pushed a billion-dollar agricultural system into such a dead end that it had to throw away super chemicals and turn to nature for rescue? Every year, more than 4 million tons of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides are poured directly into flooded farming regions across Asia. More than 40% of agricultural land in these areas is falling into a state of severe degradation. Data from global soil research centers shows that pH levels in many major rice-growing regions have dropped to alarming acidification levels. The global rice industry is reaching its physical limit. For decades, agricultural powers have maintained output with one single formula pumping in chemicals. This process creates a chain reaction of consequences. Massive amounts of synthetic nitrogen force rice plants to grow quickly, but they also burn away the organic carbon in the soil. When this carbon layer disappears, the native microbial system completely loses its function. The soil loses its ability to hold water and synthesize nutrients on its own. As a result, plant roots lose their natural absorption ability. Farmers are forced to double, even triple, the amount of chemical fertilizer just to maintain the yield level of the previous year. At the same time, harmful insects begin to change. Brown planthopers and stem borers develop stronger pesticide-resistant shells and multiply exponentially. An invisible loop forms. The more herbicide and pesticide are added, the more toxic the ecosystem becomes, and the more powerfully disease spreads. The world's largest food production system stands on the edge of a collapse that cannot be reversed by any other superchemical. Human industrial intervention has created a gigantic chemical-consuming system. But just as laboratory technology proved powerless against the genetic transformation of insects, a large-scale intervention that went against every modern standard was activated. The solution to reversing this exhaustion did not come from billion-dollar laboratories, but from one of nature's most basic food chain mechanisms. Instead of trying to sterilize the field with thousands of automatic spraying devices, waterfowl forces were mobilized as a direct biological intervention force. Bringing tens of thousands of wild animals into work instead of mechanical machines and synthetic chemicals is a risky move. From the perspective of highly industrialized agriculture, this model was once considered a step backward in farming technology. Do you believe that using animals' survival instincts can truly deliver higher precision and efficiency than modern AI systems and pesticide spraying drones? Comment your perspective below. Because the real-world measurement data coming next will break every operating rule we thought we knew. The core idea sounds simple, but the way this biological machine is deployed across thousands of hectares requires a control system refined down to each centimeter. There is no randomness or lack of control on these farming surfaces. The waterfowl force is activated only within a narrow time window from 10 to 15 days after rice transplanting. This is the biological turning point. The rice stems have just accumulated enough silica to form ideal strength, resisting mechanical impact. In contrast, weeds and pest larvae are only in their early stages, their protective shells not yet fully formed, making them the most vulnerable prey. Choosing the wrong timing, even by only a few days, would lead to the collapse of the established food chain structure. At massive scale, this campaign uses high technology to coordinate nature. Fleets of drones equipped with infrared thermal cameras are deployed to continuously scan above the fields, monitoring the heat map of duck distribution. Agronomists fix the optimal density at 225 to 300 ducks per hectare. If the number is lower, coverage is insufficient, forcing chemicals to be used again. If the density exceeds the limit, dissolved oxygen in the water is drained, and young rice root systems are severely damaged under the mechanical pressure of the animals. To achieve absolute dynamic balance, an Internet of Things sensor network is inserted deep into the shallow mud layer. These micro-monitoring stations continuously collect data on dissolved oxygen levels and biomass density. When the algorithm detects a coordinate where brown planthopper density exceeds the safe threshold, the remote electronic sluice system automatically opens. Low-frequency sound signals are released, guiding thousands of ducks straight into the center of the pest outbreak like a programmed biological robot army. When they touch the water, the food filtering mechanism through the funnel-shaped beaks of waterfowl functions like a microscopic grinding machine. They rummage close to the base of the rice plants, crushing millions of insect egg clusters attached beneath the waterline, completely cutting off the pest life cycle from the very first generation. More importantly, the ducks' webbed feet constantly stepping into the mud create an astonishing optical effect. They cloud the surface water layer, forming a natural shield that blocks 80% of sunlight from penetrating to the bottom, completely isolated from the red light spectrum needed for photosynthesis. Billions of weed seeds waiting beneath the mud permanently lose their ability to germinate. This physical impact also pumps large amounts of oxygen directly into the deep root zone. At the same time, the duck manure released into the field contains an extremely precise ratio of ammonia and organic phosphorus, dissolving immediately into the water column and feeding the crop through a biological drip mechanism, completely eliminating the fertilizer shock and root burn caused by chemical booster fertilizers. But what astonished scientists was not the mechanical scene on the fields, but the layer of quantitative data revealed when the harvest ended. Measurement stations returned results immediately after the first intervention season with numbers that stunned global agricultural analysts. The amount of pesticide required reached 0%. Nitrogen-based industrial fertilizer was cut sharply by 40%, while rice yield remained stable and even increased by another 8% in areas that had once suffered the most severe acidification. However, according to broad monitoring reports from global agricultural organizations, the underground microbial change was the greatest achievement. When the mud layer was no longer isolated by synthetic chemicals, a true biological explosion occurred in the root zone. The rise of endomycorrhizal fungi, mycorrhizae. This symbiotic fungal network functions like auxiliary root systems, releasing locked minerals and expanding the rice plant's phosphorus absorption capacity by 300%. The soil's buffering system rebuilt itself, pulling pH from the extreme acidified state caused by urea fertilizer back to the ideal neutral level. The greatest macro-level breakthrough lies in the climate equation. Flooded rice fields are normally giant biological reactors, where anaerobic bacterial populations break down organic matter and release methane. The large amount of dissolved oxygen forced deep into the mud during the earlier tilling stage immediately disrupted the biofilm, suppressed methane-producing anaerobic bacteria, and strongly activated methane-eating bacteria. Satellite remote sensing data confirmed that greenhouse gas emissions from these fields dropped sharply by 30%. At the same time, removing synthetic fertilizer restarted the carbon sequestration mechanism. On average, each cultivated hectare stores up to 2.5 tons of organic carbon per year, turning rice fields into massive carbon sinks. The ecological surface regenerated at a breakthrough speed. Water once clouded with heavy metals gradually regained its clarity. Water, spiders, frogs, shrimp, and small fish, extremely sensitive environmental indicator species, reappeared together after 2 decades of disappearance. From a financial perspective, chemical-free rice passed the strictest inspection rounds to receive organic labeling, bringing a profit margin more than 50% higher in export markets. When revenue from supplying millions of tons of clean commercial duck meat is added, the cash flow of the farming region surges. But behind those perfect growth charts, any large-scale intervention based on living organisms contains extremely complex physical risks. Unlike machines that can be powered off by a control command, this biological machine carries the risk of total collapse if the timing is wrong. The strict limit of the entire process lies in the stage when rice begins booting and flowering. At this point, tens of thousands of ducks must be collected and evacuated from the farming area immediately. A delay of only 48 hours is enough for the poultry flock, now at its strongest feeding age, to change its appetite. They begin biting apart young rice flowers and milk stage grains. The mechanical gluttony of a massive poultry population can wipe out thousands of tons of yield in a single night, destroying the harvest faster than any pest outbreak. Exposing a huge livestock population in an open space immediately turns the field into a magnet, attracting all natural predators. Foxes, weasels, venomous snakes, and birds of prey can attack from the air, causing massive losses of hundreds of ducks every night. This barrier forces farming regions to spend a huge budget on biological electric fence systems and nighttime thermal cameras. Reality also hides core epidemiological and toxicological risks. Concentrating poultry at high density in wetland areas creates an ideal virus incubation funnel. Wild avian influenza strains from migratory birds can easily cross-infect the ducks while they forage, creating a disease hotspot that can spread into other biological populations. More seriously, if the rice field has previously overused phosphate fertilizer, the deep mud layer will accumulate large amounts of lead and cadmium. Ducks constantly rummaging through the bottom mud will unintentionally act as bioaccumulation machines. Heavy metals will concentrate directly in duck fat and liver through the food chain, creating a huge hidden risk for food safety. Finally, this model is locked tightly by physical hydrological parameters. Independent multispectral satellite imagery data from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has exposed the truth: the application scale of this model is being overestimated. This system completely loses effectiveness in areas that have not been laser leveled. The farming surface requires the water level to be maintained continuously at a precise depth of 5 to 7 centimeters. A drought lasting more than 3 days will cause the mud to harden, ducks will lose mobility, and the entire ecosystem will collapse rapidly. In contrast, terraced fields with slopes greater than 3 degrees, where water continuously overflows, also cannot retain nutrients. These harsh physical limits prove a cold rule: the success or failure of natural intervention depends entirely on risk management capacity at the molecular level, leaving no room for simple biological miracles. The campaign using thousands of ducks to rebuild the surface of rice fields has exposed an important law of intervention. For the past century, humans have used the coercive power of chemistry to break natural biological cycles, forcing land to drain its nutrients in exchange for short-term yield. We created high-yield fields, but turned Earth's surface into dry lands filled with toxins. Global land resource monitoring reports have revealed a worrying truth: more than 1/3 of the world's cultivated surface has been seriously degraded. If this pace of destruction continues, humanity will face the risk of losing the last fertile topsoil within the next generation. To ensure food security at humanity's peak population, we are forced to escape this core structural collapse. Rebuilding depleted surfaces through ecological thinking is no longer an idealized choice, but a race for survival. The rise of the waterfowl and rice farming model proves that solutions for future large-scale ecological crises do not necessarily lie in creating more complex machines or synthesizing stronger active chemicals. They lie in deeply understanding the micromechanics of nature, using the very links of the food chain to rebalance the damage caused by industry. The most effective intervention is not imposing technology onto nature, but using technology to manage and amplify the self-healing power of that ecosystem itself. If you are fascinated by the bold ways humans are using to reshape the surface of the planet, press subscribe, like, and share this video. The journey to decode giant megaprojects and the consequences that are changing the face of the world day and night has only just begun.